Been a long time since I've taught. You can boo if you want to. Just don't cheer. Let's have a word of prayer and we'll start our class. Father, we know that this book that you have here is short, and we look at it and sometimes we just don't see all that you've put into it, but there's a lot of stuff in here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get any great stories or great things to learn out of it, but we're going to try. So bless us with this class tonight, and thank you for giving us this book. Help us to see what it says. In Jesus' name, amen. We are going to be in chapter 4, but I'm going to kind of walk through just a quick, brief rundown of the whole class. This is an outline I got, some commentary or another I got on a shelf at home. And basically, they talk about Jonah and the book of Jonah, and it says 4 chapters, and Jonah's running in 4 different ways. In chapter 1, Jonah runs away from God. We know what chapter 1 said. Go to Tarshish, or go to Nineveh, and he ran to Tarshish. And if you look at a map, well, Nineveh's up here, and Tarshish is over there in Spain. So it's not the right way to go. Chapter 2, right? No, Jonah ran to God. Well, I don't know if he ran to God. He kind of went down the digestive tract to decided he needed to be with God. He visited the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. If you read chapter 2 and you're looking it over and you're trying to figure out what it says he was at the bottom of the sea. He had better coordination than I did. He had seaweeds wrapped around his head. He was down there looking at the bottom of the sea. It was just, he was lost. There was no chance for him. And he prayed and he repented. I don't know when the last time you felt like you were dead at the bottom of the sea and dead. But I find something in this that I wonder if Jonah died. You remember what Jesus said? Just like Jonah was 3 days in the belly of the fish, I'm going to be 3 days in the belly of the earth. Well, just like means just like. Jesus was dead. I wonder if Jonah was dead and God brought him back. I don't know. But he prayed and he was delivered. He was brought back out of the sea, delivered to God. The fish delivered him on the shore. There was some discussion when we talked about this as to whether or not Jonah was dropped off on the edge of the Mediterranean Sea and walked to Nineveh, or if he was dropped off at the base of Nineveh. I don't think it matters one whit. I've always believed that he was dropped off where he got out of the edge of the Mediterranean Sea where he'd been swallowed, and he walked to Nineveh. It was a long walk, but that's what I always thought was true. Chapter 3, Jonah ran with God. I don't know if he did exactly, if he ran or not again, but he did what God told him for a change. Jonah 3:4, then Jonah began to go through the city a one day's walk. And he cried and said, yet 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Is that big news? If somebody started walking through Waterloo and said 40 days and Waterloo's going to be overthrown, Cedar Falls will be overthrown, anybody going to pay attention? Some people paid attention. Enough people paid attention that the news got to the king, and the king issued a proclamation. It was a pretty dramatic proclamation, too. Let me see where I am here. Word reached the king, and he arose from his throne, laid aside his robe from him, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat on ashes, and issued a proclamation, and it said, in Nineveh, by decree of the king and his nobles, do not let man, beast, herd, or flock taste a thing. Do not let them eat or drink water. Both man and beast must be covered with sackcloth, and let the men call on God earnestly that he may turn from his wicked ways, from the violence which is in his hands. So it was pretty severe. There was also a question about sackcloth. Did we get that answered? Did anybody have any more questions about sackcloth? Okay, we're good. And then we are into chapter 4. Chapter 4, starting in verse 1. But it greatly displeased Jonah, and he became angry. What is it that greatly displeased Jonah and made him angry? What it was that?
He knew God would relent.
One step beyond that. He got angry because God relented. Verse 10 in chapter 4, when God saw their deeds that turned their wicked ways, then God relented concerning the calamity which he had declared and would not bring it upon them. And it greatly displeased Jonah. And he became angry. And the Lord said, wait a minute, we get Lord or we get him first? Therefore now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for death is better than life. You remember anybody else that asked for death, said death is better than life, I'm tired of living? Anybody else? I think Job's wife kind of suggested that to him. He had a bad life, just end it, curse God and die. Job had enough brains to not do it, but that was probably close as I can come up with off the top of my memory. I know that I actually heard a guy tell me once that he was ready to die because he was so sick of life. It was a long time ago, and I don't actually remember the background of it, but I do remember a guy telling me that. He just said, I'm tired of living, I'm tired of putting up with it, I want to die. He didn't yet, but he certainly wanted to badly enough at that point. Oh, I forgot to do this too, didn't I? We're in chapter 4. Yep. Yep, please take my life. Okay. Now, it greatly displeased Jonah, and he became angry. And the Lord said, where is it? God saw, I'll change a page here. Okay, let's just go ahead. Jonah anticipated that God would destroy the city, and he sat down to watch it. Why did he sit there? And how long did he sit there? What was the original message that he had to give? In how many days? 40 days. So how long do you think he sat up there on the hillside watching? I think so too, yeah. I apologize for not having the pictures. I should have brought out some pictures. Nineveh, if you remember the Iraq war, Nineveh is what is called Mosul. And you guys remember hearing battles going on in Mosul? Look it up when you get home. Mosul is now just literally a pile of dust, but it was a huge city. You know, it says it was a 3 days walk through. According to some of the historians of the time, it was a 60-mile circle that was walled. And inside of that circle, usually most of the houses weren't set right up against the wall. There'd be a house and enough property to be able to graze a cow or two. And if they get attacked, they could have food, milk, water. They had all of that inside of the walls so they could stay together. They could keep everything going there. Huh? It's a big city, yeah. How big is Waterloo Cedar Falls? We should drive over there.
Point from I-80 to Harvard Post Road, a day and a half.
To walk?
I know I walked.
I believe you. Well, it was 120,000 people. And this was before cars, of course.
That's twice as big as Des Moines.
Yeah, I was thinking it was bigger than Des Moines. I was raised north of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Minneapolis, St. Paul right now in the suburbs have about the population of the state of Iowa, about 3.5 million people in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I haven't walked around it, but I walked a lot in Minneapolis, St. Paul when I lived down there many years ago. It's a big city. There's a comment here. I'm trying to find where it said it. Give me a second. Okay, in verse 4 of chapter 4, the Lord said, "Do you have good reason to be angry?" Have you ever thought about that? You find yourself really angry and you wonder if you're going to be asked, "Do you have a good reason to be angry?" Have you ever asked anybody if they had a good reason to be angry when they're mad at you or mad at somebody else? And what do they say?
Nothing. Just am.
Yep, I understand that. I looked a little bit in, and I will tell you, I don't understand Hebrew. I don't. But I did look a little bit in the original languages to find out what it was saying here. And basically, when God asked that question, does being angry make you more perfect, make you better? Is that what happens when you're angry? And that's the question that he was asking him. It greatly displeased Jonah, and he became angry, and the terminology there was just had a strong emotion. Not necessarily anger, but it was certainly a strong emotion. He had an emotional reaction to what was going on. Anger, frustration, whatever you want to call it, whatever it was a strong emotion. And I also thought of this too. It looks as though Jonah said, "I would rather die than see the good that you're doing." Isn't that what he's saying? I would rather die than see the good you're doing. Did Jonah consider it good? No. Jonah considered it terrible. I have another question. Was Jonah a bigot? Was he prejudiced against the Ninevites, the Assyrians? What do you think?
Didn't the prophets get more frustrated than anything? Because nobody was listening.
Yes, usually that was exactly right.
But I don't know if he
Well, there's another prophet that goes to Nineveh later and prophesies against it. It's called Nahum. And speaking of Nahum, do you remember what Jesus' basis of operation was during most of his time in northern Israel? What his base of operations was when he was operating in northern Israel? Capernaum. That word apparently means house of Nahum. It's a little changed in spelling, but that's apparently what Capernaum means, which you're not going to find a lot of places. I stumbled across it in a book of mine. But Jonah climbs out. This has got to be, it doesn't really matter what time of year it is. Whether it's the middle of winter or the middle of summer, it is hot in Israel and in Nineveh and all that area all year round. Hot. And he climbs out of the city, climbs up on a hill, and builds himself a booth. Did you notice that? He builds himself a booth and sits in the shade. Did you remember that the Jews, the Israelites, had a feast of booths? Remember what that was? What did they make booths out of? Basically, they would rip the branches off of trees and stack them up to make a lean-to and sit underneath it in the shade. Like a hut. It was to remind them of their time wandering in the desert. That's basically how they had to live. Now, when he talks about this booth or this shelter that Jonah built, first thought that came to my mind, was it like that? Well, he would have been familiar with it if he'd ever celebrated the Feast of Booths. And most of the faithful Jews did celebrate the Feast of Booths. Even the ones that were living in the north would come back down and celebrate the Feast of Booths from time to time. But what happened to that booth that God had to plant him a plant to have to grow over it? I think if it's much like the one that we're talking about, it withered up and died. All of a sudden, you don't have any shade left. Leaves all fall off, and all you got's just a couple of little branches. They're just no shelter at all. It could have been. Could have been. You know, when the east wind blows in that area, it blows across all that hot sand, and it picks up minuscule pieces of dust. You can't see it. You can basically smell it. It helps to plug up your lungs. It makes you filthy, dirty. And here he is sitting, and God caused the east wind to blow. And he got hot. When he got up, let me get verse 8. Let me see. Chapter 4, verse 8, Sam. And when it came out, the sun came up, and God appointed a scorching east wind, and the sun beat down on Jonah's head, and he became faint, and he begged with all his soul to die, saying, "Death is better than life to me." Well, sitting in the sun at 120 degrees with a wind blowing on you, it'd be pretty uncomfortable. I don't know if I'd beg to die, but I might beg for a shower or a bathtub. Now, we're going to be right at the end, verse 10. The Lord said, "You had compassion on a plant for which you did not work, and which did not cause to grow, which came up overnight and perished overnight. And should I not have compassion on Nineveh, a great city in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know the difference between the right hand and the left, as well as the animals?" What does it mean they don't know the difference between the right hand and the left? It's a way of saying something. Yeah, they don't know what's right and they don't know what's wrong. At least according to God's law, they don't. Because God's law is the Jewish law, and these people are not Jews. So here they are. They don't know the difference between right and wrong according to what God's law is. And he still is going to have compassion on them. Now that passage says, they did not cause to grow up, came up overnight and perished overnight. According to some of the translations and some of the older commentaries, that means it grew up at night, and when he woke up in the morning, there he had this shade, this plant growing up, full grown, right over his head. And he was very happy about it. When he went to bed that night, it died. Next morning he woke up, and he didn't have it anymore. Yeah, that could touch your heart and make you a little more angry. What kind of compassion does God have for animals, for strangers, for people we don't know, people who don't know us? That's this whole book. Most people have some form of bigotry somewhere inside of them. They have something they don't like. Some people they don't like. Some people don't like Vikings fans. Some people don't like Bears fans. Some people don't like it if you're from a certain city. When I was living in Seattle, I had a guy tell me once, he said, "I've been on all 50 states, and the most unfriendly state in the union was Minnesota." Well, I was from Minnesota. It was a nice way to insult me. But people just don't like something about something. And you have to fight that all the time. Jonah, he clearly didn't like Ninevites. We don't know exactly why. I can tell you what Nineveh turned into, but I don't know if he knew what was going to happen. And I've mentioned this before in another lesson or two that I've taught in the past. If you start looking over the history of the way the world was going at this time, there was a Babylonian empire, then Nineveh grew great and became the Assyrian empire and had conquered Babylon. Then Babylon became stronger and conquered Nineveh again. And then again, the Ninevites, the Assyrians, turned into a great nation again. Nineveh was infamous for their violent treatment of their people. They would treat anybody worse than dirt if they captured you in battle. They would first go through, and everybody that was over a certain age, they'd kill them. No questions, just bang, you're dead. If they were younger than a certain age, you'd kill them. If they took the women, the ones that were ugly, they'd kill them. They just all they wanted was the strong men that they could sell and the pretty women that they could rape. That's all they wanted. Then they would take chains with a pair of hooks, barbed hooks, put them through your lower lip, tied to the person in front of your neck, around their neck, and then they would march you through wherever they were going. And wherever you were conquered, you had to march back to Nineveh, to Assyria. And on the way, when they'd go through a city, if they needed some money, they'd break a couple of them out and sell them. So people got scattered thousands of miles from where they were raised, thousands of miles from where they knew. And they got left there. When the nation of Israel, which was the northern nation, was captured by Assyria and taken captive, they were never seen again. If you look through the New Testament and search for the names of the tribes that were in the northern nations, you'll find, I think, 2 people from 2 different tribes in the north. The other 8, nothing. We have no idea what happened to them. The Latter-day Saints believe that they went to the ocean, got in ships, and came to the United States and became the American Indian tribes. And that's what they teach. I think that's completely bogus, and I think it'll be proven to be bogus real quickly, but we're not going to go there. We're not into that kind of a class today. But they were never seen again. When the southern nation, when Judah was taken captive, they were taken by Babylon. And Babylon took them all and brought them to Babylon, the nation of Babylon, and left them there together as a people. And then when Cyrus became king, he sent them back home. And that's how we had the second temple, and that's how we had the nation of Judea coming into existence. If you remember, when Jesus said, destroy this temple and I will rebuild it in 3 days. And the people said, we have been working on this temple for 46 years and you're going to rebuild it in 3 days. Do you remember when the original temple was built? Solomon built it around 1080, 1100 BC. The second temple was after the Jews came back from Babylon. The Babylonians had wiped out the temple, just literally made it a flat rock, which is where they started when they built the first temple. And they laid the foundation and built from there. And when Herod the Great became king, he was going to try and make himself friends of the Jews. And so he started building it up, trying to make it great and beautiful. And it got to be a very great and beautiful building. When the Romans conquered Jerusalem in 70 AD, they again scraped it down flat to the ground. Now, the 2 biggest differences between the Roman conquest and the Babylonian captivity is, number 1, the Romans took them and scattered them, just like the Assyrians had done to their brothers in the north. And number 2, when the Babylonians took them, they let them keep their genealogical records. So these people could open up their books and trace their genealogy back from themselves all the way back to Abraham. When the Romans conquered it, they burned the books. Now, I have a question for you. if the books were burned in 70 AD, who knows that they're still a Jew or not? Who has any kind of proof they're still a Jew? Anybody? How do you prove it? How about DNA? Well, who do you check your DNA with? We have no idea if these people that call themselves Jews that have established the nation of Israel have any actual Hebrew blood in them or not. And it doesn't really matter. You can call yourself anything you want to. You can pretend to be anything you want to. But the fact is, those books were destroyed completely. And without those books, there can be no Jewish religion. That's why, one of the reasons why we are told over and over again in the New Testament, law's dead, law's gone. We no longer follow the Old Testament law. It will not be there for anybody. Now, I've hit a couple of very strange directions today. Do we have questions or comments? I know it didn't take long, but we haven't got much else. Anything?
How long did the Ninevites stay repent?
We don't know. We don't. I mean, it may have been 50 days. It may have been 50 years. I have a personal opinion, and that's all it is. And that's about one generation. And the reason I say that is when you look at almost every religious movement, one generation, and they start drifting away. It's just the way it is. So that's my opinion, but we have no information at all. There's no historical evidence about it. There's nothing. Anything else? Good question.
Probably could be because of changing of the kings or...
Yeah. And a king would change. You know, that's one of the things that we look at our country today and we just don't grasp the power of the king. The kings were all powerful. If a king was walking down the street and he looked over and liked your horse, he'd say, "Oh, that's mine now." You have no say in it. The entire nation was his children, and being his children, he could take anything of theirs he wanted by rights, by law. You've heard the term "my liege" or "my lord." That is telling them that you are my controller. What I have is yours. I'm using it just because you let me.
What Jesus was.
Yeah, that's exactly what Jesus is now. Jesus says, everything you have is mine. And that's the way it ought to be. When we have, we look at the governments of the world today. And most people, at least nowadays, think the most important or the most valuable government is a democracy or a republic, one of the two. We're a democratic republic. But the most valuable and best religion, the best system we have that exists is a theocracy, when God is truly in control and we are truly submissive. Because God will never do anything on purpose to injure or damage or hurt us.
A lot of people back in the day, like King Henry, got up on so-called tutors. A lot of people say, "Your Lord." I hand the Lord.
Yeah. Well, because they were expected to. He was the king.
It's like the word Lord is more of a proud.
Oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is. And it was then, yeah. I don't know if anybody saw in the news that King Charles made a speech in Canada this week, I think yesterday. And what do you think they addressed him as? My Lord the King, my liege, sire, all of those things. Because by law, he is in charge of Canada. He is I'm going to use a strange word, titular head. That means by title, he is the head. Does that mean that he can make the laws? No, because they have a democratic monarchy. But he is technically the head.
When I say my king.
Yeah, well, that's basically what we have an American tradition that's been upheld by lots and lots of people. If you visit a king, you do not kneel to them. That's basically American tradition. And there are some kings that some of our representatives and senators and even presidents have refused to bow to, refused to kneel to, and got really upset about it. But we are a free people. We don't have to bow to anybody except Jesus Christ. Anything else? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm done. Thank you very much.